Welcome to our Going Green podcast. We're looking today at some of the events and progress, I suppose, in COP26. And I'm Philip, and this is Paul, and we're going to try and go through some of the ideas that have come out, some of the successes, and probably quite a few of the failures.
Yeah.
Now, this was billed as being the sort of our last ditch hope to try and get to basically 1.5 degrees.
Well, the idea is 1.5 degrees by the end of this decade. So that's by 2200.
2030.
No.
The century.
It's 1.5 degrees warming by the end of the century.
Except it looks like we might get to 1.5 degrees by 2030 at the moment at the rate we're going.
Well, yeah. It's one
Projections are very hard. This is one of the big problems. You're trying to predict how much something's going to do. We're at 1.2 already, and that is only 0.3 of a degree Celsius rise globally. And at the moment, it looks like we're going to manage it by 2030. And possibly we're going to manage an extra 1.5 degrees Celsius by the end of this century, when I'm not going to be playing much more then.
Well,
I'll have probably kicked the bucket.
Exactly.
But I'll leave that to you.
At the same time, models have suggested that we could be approaching 2 degrees. As in, they were asking the president to keep 1.5 alive instead of sliding the goal to 2 degrees warming, or as devastating, could reach nearly 2.7.
Yeah.
You know,
and we look at the damage that's going on at the moment. I was looking at the news in India with the sort of the water coming in. I was looking at the sort of some of the streets of some of the main cities sort of being flooded by sort of monsoon rains. Yeah, they get them anyway. I know, but they're worse. They're bigger. They're more. We've had all those floods in Europe. We've had the fires in, well, most of the world.
Yeah.
And people are still going around at COP saying, oh, well, I don't know if I ought to do anything. So let's start at looking at some of these things that have come out of COP. And the first one is that 100 world leaders have promised to end and reverse deforestation, including Brazil, which is the home of the rainforest, which is a brilliant piece of news.
Fantastic one, yes.
If they can do it.
Well, this is the pledge, or the whole goal, is not aiming to end it, which is very simple, they can just stop it, but actually to reverse is the critical part of this pledge, or this promise, or this goal. And it's a very simple one in regards to all it is more money to stop them, but also money to plant trees, or all those sorts of things. So it's a very simple goal and a very easy one to achieve, which basically is, stop cutting down trees and plant more trees. People can get behind it.
Except if you're in somewhere like Brazil, you've got an enormous amount of illegal logging going on. It's not government controlled, and the government are just going to say, we're going to stop this. Well, they don't allow this logging at the moment, but it goes on. So you're working against people's whose livelihood is this, and they don't really want to try and stop doing what they want to do. They want to cut down some trees, they want to cultivate the land, turn it into farm, and make some money. The problem is that we've now got the Amazon rainforest, which is, instead of being called the lungs of the world, taking in all this carbon dioxide, it's now a net producer of carbon dioxide. And it's whether we can get Brazil to actually do something. Yeah, I can see an awful lot of other countries, these other 100 countries, it's not going to be quite so difficult for many of them. For us, we're going around in the UK, we're planting lots of trees, and it's already established. It's not a problem. We are putting things back. Great. And a lot of this carbon offset is done by planting some more trees, and therefore you are reversing deforestation. You're managing your forests so that when you do cut them down, you're replacing them, and that's good for the forests, really, if you're actually looking after them and maintaining them.
Yeah. So it's great news to hear that they've done this, but will be interesting to hear what's happened in the state of play, come not 5 years time, but, because they say by 2030, so halfway between 2030 is 2025.
Yeah.
So it'll be interesting to see what the state of play and how much and they've achieved by then. So the next one, and I say announcement, the next thing they pledged to do is they pledged to cut emissions of the methane by the same 2030, so they could basically halt climate emissions, because of course methane is approximately 4 times worse than CO2.
I can't remember the numbers, but it's a lot worse.
It's a lot worse.
It's a lot worse, yeah.
And so if you reduce the methane emissions, effectively you've reduced, I say the climate change, but the greenhouse gas emissions or the greenhouse effects by approximately 4 times.
Yeah, and so that helps immensely. So, yeah. You're trying to decide which camera you're going to.
I know.
Okay, right. So we can change that immensely just by... because changing a little bit of methane has a very large knock-on effect.
Yes.
And that's good. And if we can do something about that, that'll be great. Now, one of the big problems is that, well, methane, a lot of people think cows, methane, they think of the number of cows in America, methane, but it's actually not so much that. It's places like, let's choose one, Texas, that they've got all those oil fields, and they seem to have thought that rather than having an oil field in one sort of little derrick just in there, they sort of all thought they'd all have a little field, and they've got hundreds and hundreds of these, and out comes the oil, but some of the methane comes out, and, oh, it's not very good, this. Oh, what should we do with this? Oh, let's burn it. Great. And that makes carbon dioxide. That's bad. But worse is, oh, let's not set fire to it. Let's just put it into the atmosphere. And that really is not very good. And we've been watching reports on campaigns to try and stop this. But a lot of the American corporations there are saying, oh, it's going to cost us money. No, we're not interested in doing that. It's going to cost us money. Oh, no. And they got big lobbies to try and stop that.
Exactly. So it's one of those things where the idea of doing this methane is fabulous, but they're looking at where most of the methane's coming from. And then, unfortunately, in the people who actually produce the most amount of methane, this is Russia, China. I don't know if India signed up to this, but I don't think they did. It's one of those things where, because it's to do with the oil extraction.
Well, it was the US and the EU did most of this global partnership, so a lot of other countries didn't sort of get involved. But Russia's not very good with their methane. They've got old, antiquated systems, yet they do want to try and export a lot of methane. So it would be in their interest to try and do this, but they're not interested at the moment.
Exactly. I know. So the next thing, which is running out of the key commitments here, is that 40 countries have committed to move away from coal.
Yeah, and all of these countries are the countries that don't use coal very much, really.
I know. It was sort of these countries that haven't committed.
Yeah, and the US, of course, were there, and Biden's leading the charge saying, we're going to do this. Oh, we're not going to get rid of coal. Oh, no, not going to do that.
No, but...
And coal is really dirty. It makes a terrific amount of greenhouse gases.
It's not as good as the gas, as in natural gas, but it's a problem, you see, because, of course, half of the world is still powered by coal.
Yeah.
And so...
China is.
Well, China is.
India
is. Yeah, all these places, exactly. And so basically this commitment to move away basically says, right, you need to convert all your gas boilers. I don't know, something like not gas boilers, coal boilers to gas boilers, right?
Or hydrogen.
Or hydrogen, or
See, moving to gas is only moving the
parts of that
thing along a little bit. We really need them to go to energy that is made in a renewable fashion, and we're not getting that. We're not getting that commitment. China's digging up coal like there is no tomorrow. They had a problem with Australia, didn't they? Their major supplier. And now China's sort of digging up every bit of coal they can get, and they're putting it into, well, they're bringing on new sort of coal-powered sort of coal-fire power stations every few weeks.
Yeah, so although in the announcement that places like China and US didn't sign up, they have made pledges to slowly move away from coal. They just can't do it at pledge, or they can't say it now, because of course it's the transitioning into something else. But they don't know what else, because they haven't even got the infrastructure behind that else to begin with. Yeah, let's say if they were going to natural gas, they haven't got any natural gas extraction to begin to even burn it, essentially. So whereas they've got loads of coal to burn, so it's no problem. So so that's the major announcements.
And we mustn't forget India, which is the second largest user of coal, and they're still not that happy. They're sort of, they moved their date to get to carbon neutral by not 2050 like most other countries, but 2070, which is sort of still 20 years further down the line. It is sort of 50 years time, and in 50 years they can produce an awful lot of greenhouse gases.
So that's the critical ones made. We've got lovely sheets of paper, all the decisions here in front of us. So now moving on from the big newspaper headlines about the announcements to more the smaller announcements made by other countries, or at least countries who attended COP, about what they're going to do. And
a lot of those I found weren't necessarily all absolutely climate related, but quite a lot on sort of other issues.
There were other issues, but well, let's just quickly scroll through the list. There's one here I'm reading about Sierra Leone. They've made committing to address the long-standing discrimination of land tenure practices, which essentially means that previously women in Sierra Leone were denied land access and land control, ownership of the land.
Yeah, which is really good. This is a really good thing.
Yeah, so now they're going to stop that practice to allow women to own the land and control it, and perhaps the ladies might be a bit more, I wouldn't say sustainable, that's the wrong way to put it, but to be a bit more eco-friendly in their land treatment or land use, in which case might help the Sierra Leone's, I wouldn't say global eco-ness, but
it could have some effect. It can affect these are individual countries which are, and a few other things which are going to affect several countries. But so well done Sierra Leone for doing that.
Yeah, so it's one of those things where,
will it make a big enough difference?
Will it make a difference? We don't know. However, it's one of these step forwards because it is climate related in regards to ecology.
Well, I noticed there are several other ones about trying to get people sort of more gender equality, which is really good. Here in Norway, they are working to increase and strengthen the role and impact that women and girls have in climate decision making. And that's good. I can't imagine why they wouldn't have done that. And I can't imagine why it wouldn't have been done already. But then I suppose we live in the UK where we don't have these problems.
Yeah, and I can tell you in that vein, Bolivia's also, and Ecuador, these countries also pledged the same commitment that Norway has. So it's not just one of those
excellent
small things, which is great. So Yeah, and the next major thing really is is all the funding that's coming out. There were reports that there wasn't enough funding happening to this from the wealthy nations to the poorer nations to deal with climate change, and there was a goal to reach 100 billion by 2020. We didn't make it. However, the climate finance is now going to make it by 2023.
So the money will get there.
So the money will get there. And there's been major pledges and investments of doing, we're hearing from 100 to 150 million venture capital firms pledged all these things. You just go through and hear all these sorts of.
Yeah, the only
amounts.
problem I found reading some of those was they aren't necessarily giving the money away. They're actually only setting up loans, i.e. they want some money back. But at least some money will be available if people need it, or countries need it, I suppose, whereas before they might not have been able to do that.
Yeah, so it's hard to say. It's hard to see lots of grants but lots of loans are being pushed forwards, and it just has to make the green projects more viable and better, which is what half of these, all the technical meetings and documents were about, basically to say, if you want to have green projects going on, is to actually have less requirements, or not necessarily requirements, but formal objections to. If it's green, then to grant the financial status where the risk associated might be quite high, but they said, but we're going to try to take on some of the risk inside the COP pledges and things to de-risk things, to allow investors to actually invest when it's a bit more risky. Yeah, and that's not a major announcement. That's just a technical sort of, they want to do all this management of the data of not the data, or the money in the venture capital. So it's not really exciting to say that green projects will be less risky to investors.
But if they are, that's good, because then people might go ahead and do more of these things. So we've got some good things here. We've got the methane, we've got the deforestation, we've got the moving away from coal, we've got some more money, and quite a lot from many countries sort of trying to do this gender sort of, well, getting rid of gender inequality.
Yes.
And linking it all to climate change. So we've got that. The USA is promoting gender equality here.
Canada,
Sweden.
Yeah, they're all.
Germany, yeah. So there's quite a lot of countries all quite happy putting gender equality in there, which is so nice to see that sort of countries are accepting a lot of this sort of facts that, women are equal.
Yeah, and they have the equal part to play, and perhaps they might be able to
do even better.
Yeah, we'll glance over. One of the critical things I read about early on is the fact that, or actually, is the last point on our little document, Father.
Yeah.
Is the fact that 47 countries, and these are countries that you might not hear about very often, have actually pledged to make their healthcare systems emission free, or at least sustainable. Yeah, it's one of the things where low carbon as opposed to necessarily, because of course they might need to do,
and that's a third of the world sort of global healthcare emissions from these 42 of the 47 countries. 42 of them cover a third of the world, and they've set a deadline here of 2050. And I know a lot of climate activists are out there and they say, and we want this and we want it now, but things do take time. Progress generally is quite slow. If you've got to put new infrastructure in to get all these things working, it does take time. And that's a thing that we don't have, but it's a thing that we've got to accept, that things are going to take time.
Yeah, this is what they were talking about. Even though we might surge and rise to even 2 degrees, if we plateau at 2 degrees, this is global temperature rise, obviously, then surely if we plateau at 2 degrees, just doing then a bit more on top will allow us to then decrease the trend and actually help. But if we can sort of limit or even stop at 2, instead of, admittedly, we want that to be 1.5, but we're going to miss 1.5, unfortunately, but if we can if we keep below 2, or even, if we go up to 1.7, the maximum, we can then start to decrease by continuing on these policies. Because if they've managed to halt it, surely these policies will now enable the decrease to happen as well.
We can only hope so, but I'm not really holding out any hopes for some of these things. It was even interesting that I was reading about how some of the delegates went to COP26.
Oh, yes.
And some of them decided, well, look, this is on climate change. We'll use eco-friendly ways of getting there. And some of them chartered private jets. And
well, it's not the fact that they chartered private jets. It's the fact that they charter the jets to take them a very small and short distance.
Yeah.
And that's fine. But it's you get a fuel efficiency, or more precisely emission efficiency, the further you travel.
Yeah, if the plane goes up quite high, then you get sort of more miles for your, gallon, I suppose.
So if you don't go up that high, then the emissions is sort of, you're still emitting.
Yeah, your fuel use is much higher.
Fuel use is a lot higher, which means more emissions. So, it's understanding that, yes, people did travel afar, but they were all right. It's the people who traveled short distances in these.
You're not going to mention anyone by name, are you?
No, I'm going to be nice. We're going to hide the thing because it's a load of different people did it. So it's not just a key individuals, but at the same time, although individuals did it for the World Summit, their delegates actually were behaved, or I wouldn't say behaved, but they actually did do.
They did travel that way. They travelled in the more eco-friendly ways.
Right way. And there's a whole commitment outside of COP is to do lots of hydrogen fuel. Now, that's not inside COP because it's one of the things done by lots of companies, but there is a plan to make lots of hydrogen trains and to do lots of studies and testing on running trains on hydrogen gas instead of the diesel they're currently on, to see what's their state of play. But they've got to make the train first before they can even test.
So one of the things that we get out of COP is we're finding that it's not going to do what a lot of people thought. I think a lot of people had hopes that it was going to say, right, we're going to stop doing this, and this, and it's going to all be great from now on. It's not going to happen. Now, some governments have pledged to do certain things to try and bring down emissions. But in fact, we're now left with the best way of actually trying to do it. Coming out of COP, people will say, well, look, the governments haven't done very much. Can now we start to do something? Can we all do our little bit? And something that you and I, Paul, were talking about yesterday was that if all the supermarkets in the UK put doors on their fridges, and I don't know if you've walked around a supermarket, but it's often you go past the sort of milk and butter and whatever, and they walk down the cheese aisle, it's all chilly down there. And if they could put doors on there, then we could save just a little bit of energy.
And it's
how much energy, Paul?
Well, yeah, the answer is yes, they don't need too much energy, but they only save 1% of the power usage of the entire UK.
1%.
That's it. That's not horrific, man.
And it doesn't sound great, but if they do 1% And then some other industries can find another way of doing a 1%, and another one can find another way of doing a 1%. Each of those add up, and
Yeah,
it makes a difference.
which is a very good anagram or metaphor for COP, in that small steps rather than giant leaps is the way to go for progress towards climate change, or not, stopping climate change, as opposed to, because we're doing large steps already.
Well, so some of the governments are putting in some large steps. They are putting in, a lot of countries are going to get rid of coal. A lot of countries are going to try and get rid of methane. A lot of countries are going to do reforestation. Some won't. Okay, that's fair enough. But it's then down to the people. And if this can affect not just the people in this country or that country, but it can affect people in lots of countries or all countries, and everyone starts to do things, then it makes some difference. We've got to look at some things like dealing with our waste more effectively. And so much we look at things like the oceans, and they're full of these plastic bottles and boxes and all sorts of things. And you walk along the beach and you see all this rubbish. And it's a case of saying, well, look, I'm going to the beach.
I'm going
to be different. I'm going to take a plastic bag with me.
Yeah.
And you think, oh, plastic bag? Yeah, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put all that plastic that I'm going to find in another plastic bag and shove that in some recycling centre.
Yeah. And, doing that is essentially, there's been lots of these, not holidays, but planned sort of walks where you can go out and clean the beaches and do all these sorts of things. But it is action, and I'm not saying wrong action works, but of course, action relies on planning, or even more importantly, finance. And so without COP, we wouldn't be able to get all these pledges. As I said, finance pledged a lot of money, but they also had a technical discussion and talk about trying to reduce the risk to allow investors to actually put their money down rather than being too afraid to, and by doing that releases a lot more money than just saying, giving it away in a massive sort of pile. It's actually saying, right, if you want to do this program and the risk associated is quite high, the idea that COP will actually sort of the help in regards to, yes, it is a high risk. However, COP's going to take some of that risk away by partnering with a government or, whoever wants to help out and do these things. Then suddenly that risk is reduced, and it's now, I'm not saying it's going to go forward and go ahead, but the saying that, oh, we can't do it because it's too risky, therefore we won't fund it, suddenly removes that line. And now we might go, well, we won't fund it because, I don't know. Why should we not fund it? It's to help that argument of, enabling things to happen.
So big things are going to happen at a COP, which are hopefully going to work if things can be policed and organised. But I think the greatest thing that's going to come out of COP is this thing about extra money. And the extra money will fund lots of little projects, and each little project will build up and could make a significant difference. You've been listening to Going Green, our weekly podcast on the environment, climate change, and some of the things that you can do about it. In the next few episodes, we intend to try and go down more of these, what can you do about this? So tune in next time and listen to more about Going Green. And goodbye from me, and
A goodbye from me.
well done. Bye-bye.
Bye.